I bunked off school for 3 years. I just didn't want to go to school. This is a secondary school. Once I started going to secondary school, and it was all different teachers and all different subjects. And in the 3 years that I was there, I bunked off probably half that time. I didn't go to school. My dad was sending me off to school. My mum in the morning off to school, uniform on, bag. But I just did my own thing. I never went to school. And the sad thing was that nobody cared enough to tell my parents. Welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to talk about genius, or my interpretation of genius. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. That's an Einstein truth bomb. I'll talk about my own education. I think that's probably a good place to start this. I hated school. I hated the institution. I hated the teachers. I hated the buildings. I hated the curriculum. I hated it all, right? I believed that my school, my education, when I was being taught, and I think this is probably true of many schools nowadays, and for the past 100 maybe years, 150 years, maybe even longer, is that schools are there to train you to work and to train you in the art of obedience, to be obedient workers. I think that's what they're there for. I hated a lot of the lessons that I've been taught. Talking about history, from my historical point of view, I was educated until I was 11 in the UK, in England, in Yorkshire, and I came over to Ireland, into Dublin, when I was just before I turned 12 in 1978. So February 1978 we moved to Ireland, and it was at the height of the Troubles, and so English people weren't very well liked, and I had a Yorkshire accent, so I was talking like that when I came over here, a young version of that, and I soon learned how to speak Dublin very quickly, because the first thing I noticed when I got to Ireland was all the graffiti everywhere saying Brits out, and that's who I was. So and you could tell, even my first teacher refused to call me Kevin O'Hara. My name in Irish was Quivino O'Hara, and that's what he bullied me, something rotten. But anyway, that's him. He's a fucker, and who gives a shit? That's, I never look at my past like that, from that perspective. But the point is that I learned a specific education in England, a specific way of looking at English, geography, history in particular, from an English perspective. And then I came over to Ireland and I learned a lot from an Irish perspective. And when you think about England and Ireland having this connection for 400, 500, 600, for forever, right? They're neighbours. And a bad connection, I suppose, one dominating the other. The English dominated the Irish for 400 years. And my father never let us forget that when we were growing up. It was always, he'd shout at the TV, anything that came up about the crown, or the English crown, or anything like that, So it was prevalent in my life growing up, this division. But it's not more so when you learn from an early age that what one person will tell you is not necessarily the truth, right? The history is whoever is the victor is. That's the old saying, isn't it? The history is told by the victor, so it's going to be their version of the truth. And in our perspective, we learned a lot. I learned a lot about England and about Ireland from that perspective, right? But it was across the board. I hated geography. I hated the fact that I had to learn the different names of different mountains, and the heights and the lengths of rivers, and the names of rivers, and all this stuff that I could look into an encyclopedia at that stage and find. I could go into any library I wanted and find that. I mean, now it's even more defunct, and they're still teaching that crap. When you can look online if you need that stuff, you don't need to fill your head with that rubbish. So they're teaching you all this stuff that you don't need, and they're neglecting to teach you the very things that you need. We live in a social world, but how many social skills do you learn in schools? we live in a world where you need to look after yourself physically and mentally. How much of that are you learning, right? You might be taught some personal education and stuff, physical education, I should say, but how much psychology are you learning? How much are you learning how to deal with yourself and to deal with life? How much are you learning how to deal with your own finances and how to progress in life and what's the best way of progressing? But I think above all, what I bunked off school for 3 years. I just didn't want to go to school. This is a secondary school. Once I started going to secondary school, and it was all different teachers and all different subjects. And in the 3 years that I was there, I bunked off probably half that time. I didn't go to school. My dad was sending me off to school. My mum in the morning off to school, uniform on, bag. But I just did my own thing. I never went to school. And the sad thing was that nobody cared enough to tell my parents. Probably twice or 3 times I got a call that I didn't go into school. But they didn't give a shit. So, I'm not passing blame on anyone. I'm not saying that that's anyone's fault. I'm just saying that that's the way it was, in my sense. So, I always, we talk about things nowadays like science is one of those things that people take science as being a fact, and none more so than today. Listen to the facts, read the facts. These are the facts. I remember Ricky Gervais saying something along the lines of, if you get rid of all the religious texts in the world and you burn them all, right, they're never coming back. But if you get rid of all the science books, that they're all going to come back in exactly the same way. And that's bullshit. There's so much in science which is theory and it's opinion, right? Facts are not just facts. Facts can be depends on the way you look at something. You can look at something from 2 different angles and see 2 different things. But it's not just that. It's not just that we have facts. If the facts were the facts and there were the facts, it's how you interpret the facts that matter. It's your interpretation of things. And there's this thing called 2nd and 3rd level consequences. And this basically means that there's so many different things in life that you might know the first consequence of something. So you say to yourself, well, if I get drunk, I'm going to get, or if I drink the alcohol now, I'm going to get drunk. That's a 1st level consequence. Or a 1st level consequence is I'll have a hangover tomorrow morning. Right, that's a 1st level consequence. 2nd level consequences are what's going to happen in other areas of your life because of the fact that you're drinking. How does that affect your career a year down the road? 3rd level consequences, what's going to happen in your family, or how is your drinking influencing your children or your grandchildren? So you've got 2nd, 3rd level, 4th level consequences, all that kind of stuff. So I'm getting off on a tangent here because this thing is about genius, and I think genius is an overused word. I think there's very few people that it applies to in the planet. One person I can think of now is Elon Musk, maybe. I think, because he is capable of a certain level of thinking and adaptation, adapting his thinking to different levels. But I think he's genius in business structure, in seeing how a business can be put together and seeing how that can be done across different levels. But if you look at what he's doing, like his car business is funding the rocketry business, getting to Mars. But what I'm trying to say is that everybody is different. Everyone's got different strengths and weaknesses. When you take a general education system, it's set up to teach the same lessons. It has the same methods of teaching. It has the same surroundings for everyone. It has the same, there's so much similarity where people are very different. Like I say, everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. Everyone is on a journey from inferiority to superiority from an internal point of view, nothing to do with outside. Nothing to do with you're inferior to anyone else. You are inferior to your possibilities and to your potential. You're always looking to improve yourself and to move forwards. I've been doing a lot of videos this week, so my voice is sort of going at the minute. I'm having to drink a lot of water, so forgive me with that. Excuse me. So people have only really got, they're only really superior in focused areas, in where they choose to focus their areas, and people can become geniuses. Somebody can become a genius in one area. I think for me, it means that all genius is contextual and it's subjective. So it depends on the situation. It depends on how you define genius. It depends. It's one of those things that genius is in the eye or the mind of the beholder. It's who do you define as a genius? Like I said, a genius in my book is somebody like Elon Musk, Einstein, Muhammad Ali in his own way, in that field, was a genius. And there's so many examples of that. I mean, this is, like I said, it's a subjective thing, it's contextual. But who is a genius in one area is an absolute, I want to say moron, but is not a genius in every other area of their lives. It's very specific. There are many people who are born geniuses, who are born with very high IQs, who do nothing with their intelligence, and who waste it. And that's a damn shame, and there are people who are born with a lower IQ. Again, IQ, what is that? Is that some kind of it's somebody's a subjective sort of a rationale for looking at somebody's intelligence, and there's different ways of looking at intelligence. So, but somebody born with a lower IQ score, let's put it on that perspective, and does a lot because they put the work in and they put the effort in, they focus their minds. So I think it does depend on that. Genius depends on focus, and you can become genius depending on what you do. I think it depends on your values as well, what you value in life and how you pursue those values, and how you allow those values to influence your decisions and your thinking and everything else about what you do. How strict you are about those, what your levels of integrity towards your own values. I think it's important. So I think the more focused you are, the more genius you can become in a certain area in your life, and the more genius you can appear overall. One area of life that I know is that the more you understand about yourself, the more you understand about your own life, the more intelligent, the more wise you become. And isn't it the fundamental sort of cornerstone of genius? So anyway, like I said, for me, genius is built. It's something which is, it's not what you are born with that matters, it's what you do with what you're born with. That's the thing that matters the most. So I'm going to leave it there for today. There's another video up here if you want to watch that. It's on winning and learning. So take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you in the next video. Onwards and upwards. Bye now.